Thank you, Anna. Good morning, everyone. Many thanks to the organizers of this very interesting symposium. I'm very glad to be back in Grenoble. This is my second visit. Today I'll talk about an app that was part of a team. I wasn't actually the lead person, but I was part of a team that developed an app when I was based in Australia. And that app was used in a physical activity intervention program that we delivered with inactive employees. So I will talk about the process of developing the app, the challenges we experienced, and what we learned from the development process. As Anna mentioned, I'm now based in Denmark, and I'm part of a new center around motivation and behavior change. And one important aspect of this center is about developing new digital products for behavior change. So, as you probably know very well, the use of mobile apps in terms of health behavior change and in terms of physical activity promotion has increased substantially over the years. And there have been, not surprisingly, a number of reviews on this topic, which shows that there is a modest effect of apps in increasing physical activity, particularly so when they're used for at least 2 months and they're part of a multi-component intervention. And the START project was actually a multi-component intervention. More recently, there has been an umbrella review of all the systematic reviews in this area, which essentially offer a similar conclusion that apps can be effective for physical activity promotion, but also we need to consider a number of factors, obviously, such as the intervention components, how many intervention components there are, and what kind of components there are, the context in which these apps are delivered, and a number of population characteristics. And what we know in terms of studies that use these apps is that initially there is a novelty effect. A lot of people are using these apps, but app engagement is declining over time. And there's been a review by David Conroy in terms of the behavior change techniques used in these apps, which showed that behavior change techniques are not really widely used in a lot of commercial apps. This project, the STAR project, in addition to developing a new app and using behavior change techniques, as I will explain in a minute, theoretically was grounded on a theory of motivation that perhaps a lot of you are familiar with, self-determination theory, which talks about a need-supportive communication style. And this style is supposed to enhance motivation for physical activity by satisfying people's key psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. There's been a lot of work on how this can be done in the health domain, and recently there's been a classification system that tries to identify concrete ways in which healthcare professionals and other individuals working in the health domain could be need supportive. And I was also recently involved in an effort to meta-analyze the effects of self-determination theory interventions in the health domain. And we showed that self-determination theory informed interventions can be beneficial not only in terms of increasing psychological need satisfaction and motivation, but promoting sustainable changes in health behaviors and other physical and mental health outcomes. So we did use SDD in our intervention, and we used it not to train significant others to be need supportive, but we incorporated need supportive communication within the app. And we know that we were not obviously the first ones to do it, and we know that need supportive interventions delivered via digital technology means can be effective to change motivation and increase physical activity behavior. So what we did in this project was also to try to deliver behavior change techniques using more need-supportive language, and I'll give you some examples in a minute. We know that obviously there is a correlation between app usage and behavior change, but some of the studies at the time we conducted the project that looked at this relationship focus on some surface level data in terms of user engagement. For example, how many clicks, how many times they visited a particular section of participants visited a particular section of the app. But we wanted to identify more in terms of like whether the participants developed new skills and competence in terms of behavior change by engaging with the app. So we actually assessed that in our app. So we used survey questions, the semi-structured interviews, in addition to app usage data. So our objectives at the time was to expand the number of evidence-based behavior change techniques that we saw included in previous apps, and we wanted to take these techniques but also expand the number, and not only in terms of promoting physical activity behavior, but also promoting engagement with the app, and to deliver these behavior change techniques in a more need-supportive way. And we used a mixed method evaluation to identify different levels of engagement with the app. And as I said earlier, this app was part of an intervention that it was a peer-led walking program which was delivered in Perth, Australia, and the aim was to improve walking, health and well-being and work-related outcomes among inactive employees. I will not present the results of this trial today. I will only focus on the results related to the app development. So the app development had a number of phases. In the first one, we did alpha testing and beta testing. Using the beta testing, we used think-aloud interviews. We didn't have the funding at the time to develop the app for both operating systems, so we developed the app for iOS only, not for Android. Phase 2, we tested the acceptability of the app. We did surveys, we did interviews, we looked at app usage data, and we also looked at the association between app use and behavioral engagement, and we retrieved step counts from Fitbit devices. And we used questionnaires and interviews to ascertain the perceived impact of the app in terms of changes in working behaviors. So for the app, these were the people in the intervention group of the trial, with 50 workers and 9 peer leaders. Majority were females, and most of the workers didn't meet the physical activity. Actually, none of the workers met the physical activity recommendations at baseline, and the peer leaders were also primarily female, but they did meet the physical activity guidelines. So we used the UMAS scale for the survey to measure different aspects of engagement and acceptability of the app. We asked the participants to rate the app in terms of its perceived quality, and we assessed its perceived impact on working behavior. We did some semi-structured interviews, and as I mentioned earlier, we use app usage data. And essentially the app usage data was two things. How many times participants will go onto the app and enter the daily steps, and also how many times they will go into the app and log their activities. And the step counts were retrieved by accessing the Fitbit wellness platform. We didn't integrate the step count data into the app directly for two reasons. A, it was related to the cost of doing so, and B, because we wanted to use the act of the participants entering the data into the app as a self-monitoring technique. We used 17 behavior change techniques in the app, and our choice was based on a number of factors. We looked at reviews and meta-analysis assessing the efficacy of different BCTs in terms of walking, general physical activity and weight loss. We looked at other reviews in terms of app prompts and reminders, what has been used, and we also looked at commercial apps. So based on these three reviews listed in this slide and a few others, we chose 17 BCTs, which are listed here. And these BCTs were applied both in terms of the static aspect of the app, but also the dynamic one. So here are some examples of motivational messages. I'm trying to find the pointer. The laser pointer doesn't seem to work, but anyhow, so we gave different messages for people who met the step count goals and those who didn't. And these messages vary depending not only on whether they met the goals, but also at the different phases of the intervention. And these messages try to support one or more of the three basic psychological needs of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So some of the key features of the app was the manual entry of daily step count, which, as I explained earlier, was done for two reasons. We had participants to set up not only individual but team goals, which proved to be quite motivating. And we used a number of criteria to identify different goals and we gave them the option of easy goals, medium goals, and hard goals. So here's a screenshot as an example. One team chose as a team goal to walk from Perth to Bondi Beach in Sydney, which is a very long distance. We had reminders. We set daily step counts. We asked the participants to record the walk activities, and the peer leaders were also able to go into the app and record attendance, group walks, and set goals. So here are the results. In terms of the alpha testing, we identify a few fairly minor issues which we rectified. That had to do with some incorrect dates and numbers and the app crashing. In the beta testing, by using the think aloud interviews, show that the major comments had to do with the functionality of the app, the aesthetics, and the information provided. So in terms of functionality, the comments were positive, and just to give you, and the aesthetics were okay. In terms of the information, just to give you as an example, some participants felt that step counts was not something they could easily visualize, so they wanted the information in terms of kilometers, in terms of the goals they had to do. So we gave them some information in terms of how they can convert step counts into kilometers. We tried to take into account some of the feedback they gave us, and of course we had to be pragmatic because some of the feedback was not cheap to implement, but we did accommodate to a great extent comments about the aesthetics and the functionality of the app. Here are some of the results of on a 5-point scale using the UMass and some other questions that we developed in terms of the scale, in terms of the app. The overall quality was fairly good, 3.6 on a 5-point scale. In terms of functionality, aesthetics, information, the mean scores are fairly good. What is perhaps disappointing is that they wouldn't pay for the app, which perhaps it doesn't make, it's not really that surprising given how many good apps are out there. But the overall ratings were actually fairly positive, and for many of us in the team, it was our first attempt to develop a digital product at the time. In terms of the interviews, here are some of the themes that came up. One was that it was fairly easy to use. The other one was the manual entering of the daily step counts, which proved to be divisive. Some people liked it, others didn't like it. They didn't like to enter the step counts. Of course, some people didn't like the fact that it was limited to Apple devices. For those who didn't have an Apple device, we had to lend them one for the period of the project. Another interesting thing that came up, and I would like to briefly mention, is the dislike of technology. These were computer-based workers. They were in front of the screen for 8 hours, and they didn't want to engage with any more technology. They just want to have a break from technology. So, as one of the workers said, I spend my whole day on a computer, so I like to minimize my electronic engagement outside that. On average, participants recorded the step counts nearly 4.5 days per week. They were much better in terms of recording the step counts than in terms of actually recording the plans in terms of when and where and with whom they will work together. They didn't really like doing that very much. Step count goals were achieved on average of 2.3 days per week. We did some analysis, both cross-sectional and prospective, to look at the association between app usage and step count weekly. And we found that there was a significant relationship. So here I have the results from the prospective analysis, when we looked at where the relationship between weekly app usage and future step count use, which was significant at both the between and the within level. In terms of the perceived impact of the app on behavior change, the scores on a 5-point scale were just above the midpoint. It did seem to have some positive impact in terms of motivation and changing attitudes and encouraging them to work more, but the mean scores were not that high. The qualitative analysis gave us some interesting insights. Those who liked the app felt that they benefited, particularly in terms of the experience of competence they received, both through the feedback and through the messages. And competence is a key psychological need in self-determination theory. Self-monitoring proved to be another useful outcome of this technique of this project. A lot of individuals felt that they benefited from being able to self-monitor changes in their behavior, and there was a bi-directional relationship between being able to self-monitor changes and feeling more competent. And there was some individuals reported increased enjoyment and self-determined motivation for working. Now, towards the end of my presentation, I've got some reflections in terms of how things went. I think looking back, the app was favorably received. It had some good ratings. I'm sure there are other people who develop apps and have even better ratings, but the way for our first attempt to develop a digital product, I think it was I was fairly happy with. There were some challenges. So not everyone likes using technology. Some people do not like to use more technology than they already use in their everyday life. So we soon assume that everyone likes to engage in digital technology in terms of behavior change. Some didn't like the use of, they have to manually enter the step counts. Others, though, did. So step counts, though, was by far the most popular activity in terms of the app compared to making plans. And one of the reasons was that perhaps making plans was perceived as boring or too repetitive for some individuals, and they had to do it prior to engaging in the walks. Whereas entering step counts also helped with the team goals the participants had, so there was an extra motivation, the social element of meeting the team goals, and that might encourage the participants entering the daily steps much more often than the plans. And obviously, as with probably most interventions of this kind, there was a reduction in engagement over time, which has been documented in several review papers. Some participants told us in the interview that they felt sorry about that. Some participants told us that they felt that the motivational messages were quite useful at the beginning, but later on they didn't feel they needed them as much. They didn't need to engage with the app as much. But I think, I don't know, I mean, I'm happy to hear other people's thoughts. 50% of walkers remain engaged with the app over the full 16 weeks of the intervention. I don't think it's a particularly bad statistic. In an ideal world, the apps have been developed for both phone platforms, and the manual entering of step counts have been optional. So in the future, what I'm thinking of doing is give the option to participants to enter the step counts and explain why this could be a useful technique, but also bypass this option for people who don't want to do it. One challenge we had was that we worked with a private IT company, developed this app for us, and none of the people in the team had any IT background, so there is a sustainability issue in terms of what happened with the app after the trial ended. So in terms of the qualitative results, we found that the app was particularly good in terms of targeting feelings of competence, and we think that this particular psychological need will be very important in terms of future health interventions, thinking of different ways of fostering these needs both at the individual and at the group level. So collectively, both the quantitative and the qualitative data suggested that the app was useful in improving self-determined motivation towards walking, and there was a relationship between using this app and walking behaviors. So we had some positive preliminary results. For those of you who want to read more about the STAR trial, on the left is the paper that describes the development of the app. And on the right is the paper that presents the results of the trial. I would like to thank the research team who worked on this project. Professor Nikos Ntoumanis was the lead on this project, and I would also like to thank the funders, the Government of Western Australia, Department of Health and Cancer Council Western Australia for funding this project. I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation.
Many thanks, Nikos. We have time for some questions. First here in Grenoble, and then you can also ask questions for people who are online. Yes.
Thank you, Nikos. So you have targeted the walking behaviors. What will be the challenges of adapting the app for moderate to vigorous physical activity, for example?
What would be the changes?
The challenges or
the challenges?
Yeah.
In terms of the, I guess a lot of the stuff we developed in the app will still be applicable in terms of the behavior change techniques. Probably we'll have to look at the literature again and see what BCTs have been shown to be effective with this type of behaviors. That would be one particular change. I don't know whether the group form and the walk leaders will still be relevant for this app, but this app could be used even when you don't have walk leaders. I don't think there will be many significant changes apart from thinking again the BCTs that would be most relevant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. You mentioned that the app was functional as long as the trial lasted, and you had maybe a problem with keeping it going after funding disappeared for the private company. What do you think we could do about that?
Well, it's a good question. So, I mean, one of the reasons that we haven't continued was because also some members of the team moved from Australia to Denmark. So what we're trying to do now in Denmark is to engage with the university so that all platforms and digital products are developed in-house, so there is a sustainability. So I think that's one way of addressing this problem. Yes.
Thank you. Other questions?
Did you find some difference between the workers who remain engaged in the app and the others?
What kind of difference? Qualitative or quantitative? We didn't quantitatively. The only analysis we did was that we compare app usage with working behavior. In terms of some of the ratings, in terms of functionality and aesthetics and everything, it's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Maybe in characteristic, sociodemographic or other stuff to plan what works for who.
Yeah. I can't remember, and I don't know, but what I remember looking back at the paper before I did this presentation was that even those who were not engaged throughout the 16 weeks, it wasn't because they felt the app wasn't useful. A few people in the interviews told us that they got most of what they needed from the app in terms of motivation and forming groups at the beginning, and they didn't feel they needed the app as much as the second part of the intervention. But it's a good point. So I don't have a complete answer, I'm afraid, to your question. We didn't do any quantitative analysis.
Or maybe evaluate motivation before and to see the stage of motivation. And,
yeah, that would be good to do.
That.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you very much, Nikos, for your presentation of this app. I have a question about the content of this application. I don't know what is the main difference between your application and the other application you can find in the Apple Store, for example. There are different applications who help people to be more physically active. Can you explain me what is the main difference? Is it just to the supportive behavior style, or is there other behavior change technique inside the app? And did you compare the efficiency of your app with other typical apps you can find in the Apple Store, for example?
No, the answer to the last question is no. I guess the difference between our app and the apps that were available at the time we got the funding was that not only that we tried to include more self-determination in terms of how the messages were delivered and how in terms of changing behavior and in terms of engaging with the app, but also I think we included many more BCTs that what is typically available in commercial apps, and the choice of our BCTs was informed by systematic reviews and meta-analysis at the time in terms of which are the most effective for walking, but also in terms of user engagement with digital products. So, and I think I mentioned some of them at the beginning of my talk. Probably I'm going to. Yes, I guess these are some of the key aspects, and also I'm not sure how many of these commercial apps use peer leaders. So the peer leaders were also able to interact with the workers and set goals and provide feedback in the study. So these were some of the key differences, I guess.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Thank you. Do you have any idea about the effect of such apps on the possibility that people can internalize self-regulated behavior? They can be self-regulated without the need to use apps from your study or from the literature. What could be the effect of such apps to develop more self-regulated behavior?
Well, one of the papers I put up was a review by Yardley looking at engagement with digital products over time and how it's declined. And there are many reasons for that. One is the novelty effect decreases, but also some people say, similar to our study, that they get what they need out of the app, they get more motivated, self-regulated as you called it perhaps, and they don't feel they get much out of the app after a while. So the app serves as an initial tool to help them make the transition to a more active lifestyle, and then they don't need it as much. So yeah, did I answer my question? Yeah, for some individuals it helps.
In fact, more specifically, do you think such app can help people to goal settings, to be able to planning their physical activity, to be able to all self-regulated behavior, all the BCTs by themselves without the app, the use of the apps?
Some people in our study said yes. I guess even for those people who maybe find it difficult to do it on their own, perhaps by using this kind of app, they get some experience and then they can use it with new apps, new products are developed all the time. So Google now has a new product at the moment which helps people trying to meet the WHO recommendations. So it provides some sort of training, in digital training using BCTs that could be carried on with future products in the future. So I think there is some possibility here of yes, helping these people to develop some literacy, so to speak, in terms of using BCTs. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. I have a question. You observed that some people disliked technology or did not want to use more technology. Did you examine if there were relationships with participants' characteristics, I don't know, age, socioeconomic status?
Yeah, so our sample wasn't very diverse. We're all office workers working in Central Business District in Perth. So in terms of faces, there wasn't really that much variety. And they were all office workers. So they were in front of the screen many hours every day, and that's why some of them disliked using more technology during their leisure time.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions here, we are going to listen to questions online.
Okay. So I have 3 questions for you, Nikos, from the YouTube chat. So the first one is a question: can we apply smart wearable technology to promote healthy lifestyle in countries like in Pakistani context? As we have no proper research and statistic about that, and if we are doing research, so what would be the potential challenges to this kind of context?
Can you repeat the first part of the question,
Yeah.
please?
Can we apply smart wearable technologies to promote healthy lifestyle in Pakistani context? You know, in this kind of context, very, very difficult context. A tough one to begin, yeah. Okay.
I haven't really worked in that context, so I can't really talk as an expert. I've never worked with this kind of populations. So my answer would be partly an educated guess. I'll say that obviously some literacy with digital products is important because the degree of literacy will determine to some extent the uptake and the engagement with the intervention. Maybe there are certain segments of the society, maybe I'm stereotyping here, younger people might be more willing to engage. Personally, I think, and that's a broader question, broader statement than what the question implies, I don't think we should deliver exclusively digital interventions for behavior change if we have the option for some more personal face-to-face or group activities. I think digital interventions should supplement this more personal form of communication and interaction for better results. So to answer the question, potentially depends on a number of different factors. It could supplement some other efforts to get people active that use more traditional forms of intervention, including more face-to-face contact. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It was a question of Taslim Arif, and I have now a question about is step count a reliable way to measure app efficacy?
Well, it's a good question. It wasn't the only measure we had, but I guess if the emphasis of a project is to change behavior, step count is a pretty good indicator of behavior, of the target behavior. It wasn't the only one. So I would say, yeah, yes. Given the purposes of the project. And obviously the overall trial didn't just look at walking behavior, we had a number of other outcomes.
Okay. So it was a question of Christophe Pizon, and the last one is from Guillaume Chevance. So Guillaume is curious to know if do you see the transition toward digital behavior change intervention in the field because you see a real value in it, or because it's more funding for these projects today?
That's a good question. Well, I guess if I'm to be completely honest, it's a bit of both, right? I mean, and probably people who deny the latter are not being honest. But I do think that obviously that with the technology developing all the time and being better and perhaps taking even more of our time, everyday time, it gives us some opportunity to do things at scale that we cannot do face to face. We can reach people at a time that is more convenient for them. Perhaps we can deliver interventions in a more cost-effective ways. We can reach remote communities there are a lot of things that we can do with digital products. We can develop ways that products that then we can more easily use by others. So there is some sustainability compared to some face-to-face interventions where the problem is that you have the experts coming, delivering some training, and then there's an issue in terms of long-term effects. There are a lot of advantages that we can have by developing these digital interventions, in addition to getting funding, in terms of implementation and sustainability and impact. As I said personally, where possible, we should supplement these forms of intervention with some sort of more personal interaction.
Okay, thank you. It was the last question.